A $50,000 crystal chandelier glittered above the ballroom, yet it looked dim compared to my husband's triumphant smile as he raised a glass to my foster sister. They believed the contract for the Obsidian Resort was their golden ticket to a life without me. Little did they know, I secretly owned the shell company that sold them that house of cards. Inside my jeweled clutch sat a foreclosure notice, effective the moment the music ended. My name is Audrey Vance, and tonight I was wearing a smile that cost me more effort than the emerald gown draping my 34-year-old frame. Standing in the shadows of the ballroom at the Pierre Hotel, I watched the man I legally called my husband preen under the spotlights. The launch party for the Obsidian was designed to be the pinnacle of New York luxury. Champagne flowed like water, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and desperate ambition. To everyone else in this room, Julian Thorne was the visionary developer redefining the skyline. To me, he was a hollow suit I had stitched together with my own inheritance and architectural genius. Julian gripped the microphone, his other hand resting possessively on the small of Chloe's back. My foster sister looked radiant in a dress that was cut dangerously low, beaming up at him with practiced adoration. She was 26, hungry, and currently playing the role of his strategic partner. "This project," Julian announced, his voice booming with unearned confidence, "would not be possible without the true inspiration of my life. A woman who understands beauty, passion, and the future." I took a sip of sparkling water, waiting for my name. It was a habit I should have broken years ago. "Chloe," Julian said, turning to her, "you are the muse behind the Obsidian. You are better than anyone I have ever known at seeing the potential in a dream." The applause was polite but confused. I saw the glances darting my way. The whispers rippled through the crowd like a cold draft. They knew who drew the blueprints. They knew who secured the zoning permits. Yet, here I was, erased from my own narrative in real time. I tapped the small pearl in my ear. It was not jewelry. It was a high-fidelity receiver connected to the bug I had sewn into the velvet cuff of Julian's tuxedo jacket earlier that evening. Through the receiver, I heard the applause fade as Julian leaned in to whisper into Chloe's ear. His voice was crisp and cruel in my earpiece. "Don't worry, babe," he murmured. "Just keep smiling. That dried-up workhorse over there has no idea. I'm serving her the divorce papers tomorrow morning. She'll be on the street with nothing but her drafting pencils." Chloe's giggle was a high-pitched scratch against my eardrum. "Oh, Julian, you're so bad. What if she makes a scene? She won't," Julian replied. "She's too weak. Too boring. She'll just fade away." I did not cry. I did not throw my glass. Instead, I checked the time on my diamond-encrusted watch. It was 9:45, according to my calculations. The high-interest bridge loan Julian had signed to fund this party was accruing interest at a rate that would bankrupt him within 6 months if the principal remained unpaid. But I was not going to wait 6 months. I caught the eye of a man in a charcoal suit standing near the entrance. This was Mr. Henderson, a senior banker I had allegedly introduced to Julian weeks ago. In reality, Henderson was an actor I had hired, and the bank he represented did not exist. Henderson nodded and made his way through the crowd, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. He approached the stage just as Julian was descending, looking like a king who had just conquered the world. "Mr. Thorne," Henderson called out, his voice carrying the perfect weight of urgency and deference. "Apologies for the interruption, sir, but the final wire transfer from the investors just cleared. We need your signature on the receipt immediately to lock in the bonus capital." Julian's eyes lit up. Greed was the only emotion he wore more naturally than arrogance. He snatched the envelope, assuming it contained the millions he thought he had swindled from the market. "Excellent," Julian said, loud enough for the nearby investors to hear. "See, Chloe's success just keeps rolling in." He had no idea that by signing that receipt, he was not accepting funds. He was acknowledging receipt of a notice that the collateral for his loans, including our marital home and his personal assets, had been transferred to a holding company called Vanguard, my holding company. I raised my glass in a silent toast from across the room. Drink up, husband. The poison has just been served. Watching Julian bask in the applause of the unknowing crowd, my mind drifted back 5 years. That was when the foundation of this disaster was poured. When we met, I was already a partner at a prestigious firm, my name attached to award-winning skylines. Julian, on the other hand, was a third-rate real estate broker with a smile that was too wide and a client list that was non-existent. He charmed me not with success, but with the illusion of potential. He played the part of the diamond in the rough perfectly, and I, arrogant enough to think I could polish him, fell for it. I built Thorne Development with my inheritance and my reputation. I put his name on the door and the title of CEO on his business cards because I wanted to give him dignity. I wanted a partner, not a dependent. It was the first structural flaw in our marriage. I provided the capital, the designs, and the strategy, while Julian provided the face. He loved the role. He loved the Italian suits I paid for and the respect he had not earned. Then came Chloe. My foster sister had always been a shadow in my rearview mirror, drafting off my momentum. She was the daughter of my stepfather, a girl who grew up looking at my achievements not with pride, but with a covetous hunger. When she called me 3 years ago, begging for a job, I let my guard down. I thought bringing family into the business would strengthen the foundation. I appointed her as Julian's executive assistant. I essentially handed the match to the arsonist. The erosion was subtle at first. It started with the comparisons. Julian began to critique my wardrobe, which favored sharp lines and neutral tones suitable for boardrooms. "Why do you always dress like a funeral director?" he asked me one evening over a dinner I had paid for. "Look at Chloe. She wears color. She looks alive." I brushed it off as stress. But the requests for money began to escalate alongside the criticism. Julian demanded capital for vanity projects that made no financial sense. He wanted a fleet of company cars that were really just toys for him to race on weekends. He wanted a corner office renovation that cost more than our first house. When I pushed back with spreadsheets and logic, he did not see wisdom. He saw a cage. The breaking point of my emotional attachment happened 6 months ago. I remember the night vividly. Julian had just come home from a business dinner with Chloe, smelling of expensive whiskey and her cloying perfume. I confronted him about a $50,000 withdrawal from the company operating account. He threw his jacket onto the sofa and looked at me with pure disdain. "God, Audrey, is that all you think about money spreadsheets? That money was for the contractors." "Julian," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we cannot build a reputation on unpaid invoices." He laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "You are so dry. You are like a machine. You know what Chloe understands, Vision. She understands that you have to spend money to project power. She inspires me. You just drain me." "I drain you?" I asked, looking at the man whose entire career was a parasitic growth on my own. "Yes," he shouted, his face red. "I need a woman who knows how to enjoy life. Chloe is better than you. Audrey, she makes me feel like a king. You make me feel like an employee." That was the moment the love died. It did not fade. It was extinguished instantly, like a candle in a vacuum. I looked at him and saw him clearly for the first time. He was not a struggling visionary. He was a leech. I could have divorced him then. I could have thrown him out that very night. But we were on the verge of launching the parent company's IPO, and a messy divorce scandal involving the CEO would have spooked the investors. I needed to protect the assets. I needed to separate the healthy tissue from the tumor before I cut. So I decided to wait. I decided to let him believe he was winning. I let him have his phantom power and his treacherous muse, knowing that eventually his greed would be the very thing I used to destroy him. The digital clock on my laptop read 3:14 in the morning when the anomaly caught my eye. It was a single line item in the quarterly expense report, buried under construction materials. A wire transfer of $250,000 to an entity labeled C&J Future. I sat up straighter in my ergonomic chair, the silence of my home office pressing against my ears. We did not have a vendor named C&J. I opened the terminal window and began to type. I was not just an architect, I was the woman who built the financial infrastructure of this company, and I knew where the skeletons were buried because I had dug the graves myself. I traced the routing number. It bypassed our operations account entirely. The funds had been siphoned directly from the Vance Foundation, a charity account I had set up to build housing for the homeless. My hands did not shake. They moved across the keyboard with the precision of a surgeon. Within 20 minutes, I had the deed. The money was a down payment on a penthouse in Soho. The names on the title were Julian Thorne and Chloe Vance. He was stealing from orphans to build a love nest with my sister. I needed more. I logged into the security server for the executive suite at Thorne Development. I filtered the footage by audio spikes, looking for conversations held after hours. I found one dated 3 days ago. Julian was pacing in his office, holding a tumbler of scotch, speaking to his personal lawyer on speakerphone. I put on my headphones and turned up the volume. "The guarantee. Is it ready?" Julian asked. "It is." The lawyer's voice crackled. "But Julian, if she signs this, she is personally liable for the entire Obsidian loan. If the project fails, she loses everything on the screen." Julian laughed. It was a sound that made my stomach turn. "That is the point," Julian said, leaning back in my leather chair. "I need her to sign the guarantee next week. Once the bank releases the funds for the Obsidian, I file for divorce. The debt stays with her name on the contract. The assets flow to the new holding company." "Are you sure about this?" the lawyer asked. "Audrey is smart. Audrey is tired," Julian sneered. "She is boring. Chloe is better than Audrey in every way. On the bed and in the press. Audrey is just an old ATM machine. She spits out cash when I punch the right buttons. Once I have the Obsidian money, I'm unplugging her." I paused the video. I stared at his pixelated face. I expected rage. I expected to want to scream. Instead, a cold, clinical clarity washed over me. This was not a marriage crisis. This was an attempted hostile takeover. I continued digging. If Julian was sloppy enough to steal from a charity account, what else was he missing? I turned my attention to the C&J Future account. Julian was dumping money in, but someone else was pulling it out just as fast. I tracked a series of withdrawals made at ATMs in Las Vegas. $5,000, $10,000, then a wire transfer to a man named Dax, who had a criminal record for illegal bookmaking. I leaned back and let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Oh, Chloe," I whispered to the empty room. My sister was not just enjoying Julian's money. She was skimming off the top to fund a secret boyfriend with a gambling addiction in Nevada. My husband was embezzling from me to buy a future with a woman who was embezzling from him to pay off a thug. It was a circle of parasites. I closed my laptop. The time for weeping was over. I did not need a marriage counselor. I needed a forensic accountant and a shark of a lawyer. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. "It's Audrey," I said when the voice on the other end answered. "I need a full workup. Surveillance, asset tracing, the works. I am about to perform a very painful surgery on my life." "Who is the target?" the voice asked. "Everyone." I replied, "Burn them all down." For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own home. I stopped wearing makeup, allowed my hair to hang in limp, unwashed strands, and spent my days staring vacantly at the television in the living room. It was a performance worthy of an award. To Julian and Chloe, I was a broken woman, depressed and completely checked out of the business. My apparent weakness was the fertilizer for their arrogance. They stopped whispering when they entered the room. They stopped hiding their phones. They thought the lioness had lost her teeth. While I played the part of the defeated wife, my attorneys in the Cayman Islands were busy birthing Vanguard Holdings. It was a shell company, a corporate phantom with no history and a very aggressive acquisition strategy. Through a proxy, Vanguard approached Julian with the deal of a lifetime. We offered to sell him the Obsidian, a resort project that was allegedly fully permitted and ready for construction. The price was $40 million, which was suspiciously low, but we framed it as a distressed asset sale that needed to close within 48 hours. Julian took the bait. He did not see a trap. He saw a shortcut to becoming a billionaire without my help. He saw a way to finally eclipse me. On Tuesday evening, Julian came home with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. He found me on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the wall. "Audrey," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "We need to sign some papers. It is just some tax restructuring. You know how the accountants get this time of year." I turned my head slowly, keeping my eyes dull. "I don't want to deal with this. Julian, can't you just handle it?" "I can," he said, suppressing a smile. "I just need your signature here to authorize the transfers. It will protect your assets. Honey, trust me." He laid the documents on the coffee table. The stack was thick. The top page was exactly what he said it was, a standard tax form, but the pages underneath were the lethal injection. He wanted me to sign a guarantee that would make me personally liable for the $40 million loan he was taking out to buy the Obsidian from Vanguard. He planned to default, leave me with the debt, and keep the asset in a separate entity. "I am so thirsty," I whispered, my voice raspy. "Can you get me some water?" Julian sighed, clearly annoyed by the delay. "Fine. But then you sign." He walked to the kitchen. The moment he crossed the threshold, my lethargy vanished. I reached into the cushions of the sofa where I had hidden my own stack of papers. They were printed on the exact same cotton bond paper, with the same font and margins. With a hand steady as stone, I swapped the inner 40 pages of his contract with mine. He returned 10 seconds later with a glass of water. I was back in my slump, the papers undisturbed on the table. "Here," he said, shoving the glass at me. "Drink. Then, sign." His phone buzzed on the table. It was Chloe. I could see her name flash on the screen. He glanced at it and typed a quick reply. I knew exactly what she was saying. She wanted him to close the deal so she could start planning her wedding at the new resort. "Come on, Audrey," Julian snapped. "I don't have all night." "Do this for us." "Okay," I said weakly. "For us." I watched him sign his copy first. He thought he was signing a purchase agreement that gave him total control. In reality, because of the swap, he was signing a confession of debt. He was acknowledging that every penny borrowed was his personal liability, and more importantly, he was signing over the trademark rights of the Thorn name to me. He pushed the pen toward me. "Sign right there." He pointed, his finger trembling slightly with anticipation. "Just get it over with." I took the Mont Blanc pen. The cool metal felt like a weapon in my hand. I looked at the signature line. By putting my name there, I was officially selling the toxic asset to him and activating the trap. I looked up at him. For a split second, I let the mask slip. I smiled, a genuine, sharp smile that did not reach my eyes. "You know, Julian," I said softly, "I really hope this works out exactly how you deserve. Just sign the damn paper," he hissed, losing his patience. I signed. The ink flowed smoothly. The trap snapped shut. I had just sold my husband a ruin for $40 million, and he had just thanked me for it. The ink on the fraudulent contract was barely dry, but Julian and Chloe were already spending the windfall they believed was coming. My phone buzzed incessantly with security alerts from the joint accounts I had not yet closed. They were not buying groceries. They were putting down deposits on a 60-foot custom yacht and commissioning diamond necklaces. It was pathetic to watch. They were like children raiding a candy store 5 minutes before closing time, to heighten their anxiety. I engaged in a game of digital cat and mouse. Every time Julian tried to make a significant transaction, I would log into the banking portal and freeze the card. Why is this card declined? Julian shouted from the living room, throwing his platinum card onto the marble counter. I am the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire. This is embarrassing. I walked in, holding a cup of tea, feigning confusion. It must be the bank's fraud detection system. Julian, you are spending a lot very quickly. I will call them to lift the block. Just give me an hour. I unblocked it, let him make one purchase, and then blocked it again. I wanted him frustrated. I wanted him on edge, but the cracks in their alliance were forming without my help. My private investigator sent me a heavily encrypted email on Thursday. The subject line was simply, "The rabbit died." Attached was a medical report stolen from Chloe's gynecologist. Chloe was pregnant. I did the math instantly. Based on the gestational age of the fetus, conception occurred exactly 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Julian was in Tokyo for a trade summit. The father was not my husband. The situation spiraled when the investigator sent a second update. Chloe's secret boyfriend from Las Vegas, a man named Dax, was in New York. He knew about the baby, and he knew Chloe was close to a payday. He was not asking for hush money, he was demanding it. That afternoon, I watched from the hallway shadows as Chloe slipped into our master bedroom. She moved with frantic energy. She opened Julian's watch case and took his vintage Patek Philippe, a timepiece worth $12,000. She shoved it into her purse and ran out the back door. She was not stealing for herself. She was stealing to keep Dax from knocking on our front door. When Julian came home that evening, the house was quiet. He went upstairs to change for dinner and came down 5 minutes later, his face pale with rage. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Where is my Patek?" I left it right there in the case. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, filing her nails, acting the part of the bored mistress perfectly. I saw Maria cleaning in there earlier. "Julian, you know how she is. Maybe she knocked it over or took it to clean it." "Maria has been with us for 10 years, I interjected, defending the maid I had already sent home early to protect her from this chaos. "Well, people change when they see shiny things," Chloe said, shrugging. "Don't look at me. I don't need your old watches." Julian wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. He grumbled something about insurance and poured himself a stiff drink. He was suppressing his suspicion, pushing it down deep where it would fester. I decided to water that seed of doubt. Before dinner, I pulled a glossy brochure I had picked up from a clinic. It was an advertisement for paternity testing services. I left it casually on the coffee table, half hidden under a magazine about luxury yachts. When we sat down for dinner, the air was thick enough to choke on. Julian was drunk enough to be cruel. He looked at Chloe, then at me, and let out a scoff. "You know, Audrey," he said, slicing his steak aggressively. "Chloe has something you never had. A natural warmth. She is going to make an incredible mother one day. She understands that a family is about legacy, not just business contracts." He looked at Chloe's stomach. He knew she was pregnant. He thought it was his heir. "I am sure she will," I replied, my voice steady despite the bile rising in my throat. Motherhood requires a lot of honesty. Chloe is certainly full of surprises. Julian missed the double meaning, but Chloe flinched. She dropped her fork. The clatter rang through the dining room like a warning bell. I took a sip of my wine and checked my watch. The foreclosure notice was printed and ready in my safe. Their time was almost up. The reality of the Obsidian project was a masterclass in due diligence failure. To the naked eye, and to a lazy investor like Julian, it was a pristine stretch of coastline ripe for development. However, in the appendices of the contract, specifically on page 214, written in font size 6 Vanguard Holdings, had fully disclosed that the land was currently designated as a protected wetland with a pending class action lawsuit regarding groundwater contamination. Julian bought a toxic swamp for $40 million because he was too arrogant to read the fine print. To fund this disaster, Julian had gone to extremes. He drained the remaining liquid assets from Thorn Development and, as my sources confirmed, took a bridge loan from private lenders with connections to organized crime. The interest rates were astronomical, but Julian was convinced he would flip the property within a month. On Wednesday morning, the wire transfer hit the Vanguard account in the Cayman Islands. I sat in my home office, sipping black coffee, watching the numbers align on my screen. The moment the funds cleared, I did not let them sit. I initiated the second phase of the operation, using the capital Julian had just paid me. I contacted the various banks and creditors holding Julian's other debts. I purchased the note on his Ferrari. I bought the mortgage on the bachelor pad he secretly maintained in the city. I acquired the outstanding loans for his previous failed ventures. By noon, the money had traveled in a perfect circle. Julian's money was back in my control, and I was no longer just his wife. I was his sole creditor. I effectively owned 100% of his existence. While the financial noose tightened, the emotional pressure cooker in the house was ready to explode. Chloe was becoming frantic. Her pregnancy was not showing yet, but her anxiety was palpable. She needed the ring on her finger before the baby bump ruined her silhouette. I overheard them in the library on Friday evening. "You have to do it now." Julian Chloe's voice was shrill. I am scared. What if people notice you promised me we would be a legitimate family before the launch? Calm down, Julian snapped. I will handle her. She is weak. She will sign anything to avoid a fight. 10 minutes later, Julian marched into the kitchen where I was arranging flowers, a domestic task I performed solely to irritate him with its banality. He threw a heavy manila envelope onto the granite island. It slid across the surface and struck my hand. I am done carrying dead weight. Audrey, Julian declared, adjusting his cufflinks. These are divorce papers. My lawyers drew them up this morning. You are suffocating me. I need to be with someone who matches my new level of success. I looked at the envelope. Inside, I knew, were terms that would leave me with pennies while he kept the empire. He had no idea the empire was already mine. You want to end 10 years of marriage just like this, I asked, keeping my voice devoid of emotion. Right before your big night. Because of the big night, Julian laughed. A cruel, barking sound. I want to stand on that stage as a free man. I want to introduce Chloe as my partner in every sense. You simply do not fit the image anymore. You are too plain. I picked up the envelope. I did not open it. I simply nodded. Fine, I said. I will agree to a separation. But I have one condition. We announce it together at the Obsidian launch party tomorrow night. A clean break in front of the world. I do not want rumors shadowing my exit. Julian's eyes lit up. He saw an opportunity to publicly discard me, to show the elite of New York that he had traded up. It was the ultimate ego stroke. Perfect. He sneered. You always did know how to make a graceful exit. Just make sure you dress nicely. I don't want you looking like a beggar when I stand next to Chloe. Don't worry, Julian, I replied, turning back to my flowers so he could not see the cold amusement in my eyes. I will wear something unforgettable. Tonight, the mourning widow costume was left in the closet, in its place. I chose a gown of midnight blue silk, structured and sharp as a blade, with a neckline that plunged just enough to suggest I had nothing to hide. I applied lipstick the color of a fresh wound and fastened a diamond choker that I had bought with my own dividends. I was not coming to this party to fade into the wallpaper. I was coming to burn the house down. I arrived at the Pierre Hotel 45 minutes late. It was a calculated delay. The ballroom was already at capacity, a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns swirling under the golden light. At the center of it all stood Julian and Chloe, holding court like royalty. Chloe was clinging to Julian's arm, waving her left hand around with frantic energy. On her ring finger sat a massive stone that caught the light with a blinding, almost artificial brilliance. Julian had told her it was a 6-carat flawless diamond. I knew for a fact it was high-grade moissanite he had picked up for $300 because he was too cheap to spend real capital on a woman he thought he already owned. I stepped through the double doors. The heavy oak slammed shut behind me with a thud that seemed to echo through the room. Heads turned. The chatter near the entrance died out, creating a ripple of silence that spread toward the stage. I walked forward, my heels clicking a steady, martial rhythm on the marble floor. I did not look like the broken, depressed wife Julian had left at home. I looked like the CEO I actually was. Julian spotted me. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners. He excused himself from a group of investors and intercepted me near the champagne tower, grabbing my elbow with a grip that was painful enough to bruise. He steered me aggressively into a shadowed alcove. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his face inches from mine. "And why are you dressed like that? You were supposed to be sick. I made a miraculous recovery," I said, pulling my arm free from his grasp. "I told you, Julian, I wanted to be here for the big announcement. Listen to me." "Audrey," Julian warned, his eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching. "Do not make a scene. Do not embarrass me. This is my night. Chloe is out there charming people in ways you never could. She is better than you. Audrey, she is vibrant. You are just a shadow." He expected me to flinch. He expected the old Audrey to apologize. Instead, I smiled. It was a cold, predatory baring of teeth. "You are right, Julian," I replied, my voice smooth. "She is better than me at acting. I just hope she is also good at enduring prison time." Julian blinked, confusion washing over his anger. What are you talking about? Mr. Thorne, the event coordinator, waved frantically from the stage. "It is time for the speech." Julian looked at me, then at the stage. He did not have time to decipher my warning. He adjusted his jacket, shot me one last glare of contempt, and marched toward the microphone. I watched him go. I watched Chloe trot up the stairs to join him, whispering something urgently in his ear. She placed a hand on her stomach. I saw Julian's face light up with a greed that transcended money. He thought he had won the genetic lottery too. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian bellowed into the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers. "Thank you for coming to celebrate the birth of the Obsidian. But tonight, I have double the good news. Not only are we launching the greatest resort in history, but I am thrilled to announce that our family is growing." The crowd gasped and applauded. Chloe beamed, playing the blushing mother-to-be. I stood perfectly still near a marble pillar. I raised my right hand and adjusted the diamond choker at my throat. It was the signal. From the four corners of the room, 6 men and women who had been blending in as guests set down their champagne glasses. They were not investors. They were federal agents and forensic auditors from the district attorney's office. They began to move through the crowd, forming a tightening circle around the stage. The music swelled to a crescendo, but for Julian and Chloe, the song was already over. Julian was midway through a sentence about his unparalleled business acumen when I gave the signal to the technician in the control booth. The massive LED screen behind him, which had been displaying a rotating golden render of the Obsidian, flickered and died. The sudden darkness made the crowd gasp. A second later, the screen roared back to life, but the golden resort was gone. In its place was the stark, predatory black and white logo of Vanguard Holdings. Julian turned around, blinking in the glare. What is this?" he stammered into the microphone. "Technical difficulties." Someone cut the feed. I stepped out from the shadows of the wings and walked onto the stage. The click of my heels on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. I reached out and firmly took the microphone from Julian's limp hand. He was too stunned to resist. "There are no technical difficulties." I addressed the crowd, my voice calm and amplified to every corner of the ballroom. "I am Audrey Vance, the chairwoman of Vanguard Holdings, and I am afraid this launch party is premature. The Obsidian project has been suspended effective immediately due to a severe breach of contract and failure to meet solvent payment obligations. Julian laughed, but it was a nervous, cracking sound. He looked at the audience, desperate to regain control. She is having a breakdown, he said, pointing a shaking finger at me. Audrey, you are embarrassing yourself. I paid Vanguard. I wired $40 million 3 days ago. I have the receipt you did wire $40 million. I replied, nodding to the screen. The image changed. It displayed a complex flowchart of funds. However, I continued, pointing to the graphic, you failed to read the cross-collateralization clause in the agreement you signed on Tuesday. That clause stated that any funds received would first be applied to outstanding debts held by the creditor. Since I bought all your bad debts, Julian, that $40 million did not buy you a resort. It paid back the money you embezzled from my charity, the money you lost in bad investments, and the loans on your cars. You did not buy an empire. You just paid your tab. No, Julian whispered, the color draining from his face. That is impossible. I signed a purchase agreement. You signed a transfer of assets, I corrected him. Page 42. You pledged all personal property, including your shares in the company, your real estate, and your personal bank accounts, as collateral for the debt. Since the debt is now paid, but the penalties remain. I have exercised my right to seize the collateral. You own nothing. You are standing in a tuxedo that technically belongs to me. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. I turned to look at him directly. You told me yesterday that Chloe was better than me, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous register. You said she knew how to enjoy luxury. It is a pity, Julian. The only reason she could enjoy that luxury is because I was funding it. I was the one keeping the lights on while you two played house. Julian spun around, his eyes wild, searching for Chloe. She was standing near the edge of the stage, looking like a trapped animal. Chloe, Julian yelled, his voice cracking. Tell her about our savings. We have the joint account. We have millions in there. Oh, the joint account, I said, pressing a button on the clicker I had concealed in my palm. Let us see how that account was actually used. The screen shifted again. This time, it was grainy footage from a security camera inside a bank vault. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. It showed Chloe stuffing stacks of cash into a duffel bag and handing it to a man with tattoos on his neck. The audio played clearly over the speakers. Take it. Dax. Chloe's voice rang out, sharp and dismissive. That is $50,000. It should keep you quiet for a while. God, Julian is such a fool. He actually thinks I love him. He is just an easy mark. Once I get the ring, I am clearing him out. The ballroom fell into a silence so profound I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Julian stood frozen. He looked at the screen, then at Chloe. The woman he had destroyed his marriage for was currently shrinking away from him, her face a mask of terror. You, Julian choked out, his voice barely a whisper. You said I was your king. I lied. Chloe's voice on the recording echoed again, mocking him from the past. The alliance was shattered. I stood center stage, watching the man who thought he was a genius realize he had been the punchline of a joke I had been writing for months. I was not finished. The financial ruin was just the appetizer. The main course was the destruction of his ego. I held up a hand to silence the murmurs rippling through the ballroom. There is one last loose end, I announced, my voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Julian, you were so proud of the new addition to your family. You announced it to the world tonight, but I think you should meet the real father before you start buying cribs. I gestured to the side entrance. The heavy doors swung open, and 2 of my security guards escorted a man inside. It was Dax, the man from the surveillance video. He looked wildly out of place in his leather jacket and torn jeans, blinking under the crystal chandeliers. Julian looked from Dax to Chloe, his eyes widening in horror. Who is this thug? Julian stammered. "This is Dax," I said calmly, stepping closer to Julian. "He is Chloe's boyfriend from Las Vegas." And according to the prenatal DNA test I ran using hair samples from Chloe's hairbrush this morning, he is the biological father of the child she is carrying. I pulled a folded document from my clutch and tossed it at Julian's feet. "The probability of paternity for Dax is 99.9%, I stated. "For you, Julian 0. Julian stared at the paper on the floor as if it were a bomb. He did not pick it up. He began to shake, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "No," he whispered, then louder. "No, that is a lie. She said it was mine. She swore on her life." Dax stepped forward, shrugging his shoulders. He looked bored, clearly having been paid well for his appearance. "She lied." "Bro," Dax said, his voice rough and amused. "Chloe told me she found a rich idiot to pin it on. She said you were an easy mark. She just wanted a meal ticket for us." The ballroom was dead silent. Every eye was fixed on Julian. I stepped into his personal space, forcing him to look at me. "Do you remember what you told me?" I asked softly. "You said she was better than me. You said she was a real woman. Well, Julian, at least I never made you raise another man's child." The words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, gasping for air. "Chloe," he screamed, turning on her. "Tell them it's a lie. Tell them." But Chloe was done pretending. The facade of the sweet, adoring mistress shattered instantly. She lunged at him, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. She did not cry. She clawed at his lapels, her nails tearing the silk. "You useless idiot!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "You promised me millions. You promised me a resort. You have nothing. You are just a broke loser who lived off his wife." "Get off me!" Julian yelled, pushing her away. You parasite. I am the parasite." Chloe laughed hysterically. "You stole from a charity. You are a criminal." "That is correct." A deep voice boomed from the floor. The crowd parted as 4 officers in dark suits marched toward the stage. They were not hotel security. They were agents from the Economic Crimes Unit. I had sent them the dossier of evidence 3 hours ago. "Julian Thorne," the lead agent announced, flashing his badge. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, bank fraud, and grand larceny. Hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. Julian looked down at the metal cuffs, then up at the agents, and finally at me. The reality crashed down on him. The yacht, the resort, the new life, it was all gone. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, dragging the agents down slightly with his dead weight. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat of his panic. "Audrey," he sobbed, his voice broken and pathetic. "Audrey, please, tell them it is a mistake. We are married. You can't let them take me. I love you. I always loved you. It was her. She made me do it." I looked down at him. 10 years of marriage, and this groveling creature was what remained. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the cool indifference one feels when discarding a broken appliance. Save your breath. "Julian," I said, "you will need it for your lawyer. Around us. The guests, the titans of industry, the investors. The people Julian had tried so hard to impress were turning their backs." They sipped their champagne and whispered, looking at him not with pity, but with the utter disdain reserved for a clown who had forgotten his place. I looked down at the man crouched at my feet, the handcuffs glinting under the lights. Seeing Julian reduced to this sobbing, broken mess did not bring me the surge of malicious joy I had expected. Instead, I felt a profound sense of lightness, the specific relief of finally kicking off a pair of shoes that had been pinching my feet for a decade. He tried to lean toward me, but the agents held him back. "Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his weeping, The house in the Hamptons, the apartment in the city, the cars, and even the tuxedo you are currently wearing all belong to Vanguard Holdings. Enjoy prison. At least there, the jumpsuit will actually belong to the state, not to me. On my signal, the agents hauled him up by his armpits. As the cameras flashed, capturing his humiliation for the front page of every tabloid in New York, Julian twisted his head, searching frantically for his partner in crime. "Chloe!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Chloe, help me! Call my lawyer!" But Chloe was not calling anyone. Near the exit, Dax had a firm grip on her elbow. She looked terrified, her face pale under the heavy layer of makeup. She tried to pull away, but Dax leaned in close, whispering something that made her freeze. She was not going to be the queen of a resort. She was going to be the cash cow for a gambler until every cent she had stolen was gone. I watched as he dragged her out the side door, into a future that would be far darker than the shadow she had lived in. I turned back to the stunned room. The silence was heavy, filled with the tension of 1,000 unasked questions. I signaled the waiters to refill the champagne glasses. "Please," I announced, raising my own glass. "Do not let this interrupt the evening. The party continues. However, we are no longer celebrating a resort launch. Tonight, we are celebrating my return to the market as a single woman and the sole owner of the Thorn Empire." The applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar. They loved a winner, and tonight, I was the only one standing. In the weeks that followed, I tied up the loose ends with the precision of a butcher. I sold the Obsidian project, with all its environmental liabilities, to a rival developer who had always hated Julian. I sold it at a premium, framing it as a conservation tax credit opportunity. The profit from that single sale covered every dollar Julian had embezzled, plus interest. Chloe's fate was less administrative. My private investigator sent me a photo 6 months later. She was working as a waitress at a roadside diner in New Jersey. She looked 10 years older, her designer clothes replaced by a stained uniform, her eyes dull and defeated. Dax was waiting for her in the parking lot to collect her tips. She had wanted a man who would fight for her. She got one who fought her for pocket change. As for Julian, he became a celebrity in the worst possible way. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for fraud and grand larceny. Inside, he was not the big-shot CEO. He was the punchline of the cell block. The story of him raising another man's child while trying to bankrupt his wife had made him the laughingstock of the penitentiary. But none of that mattered to me anymore. I drove my Rolls-Royce Phantom down the highway, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. The engine purred, a sound of pure, unadulterated power. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from an unknown number, likely smuggled from inside the prison. "Audrey, please. I am sorry. I have nothing. Please pick up." I did not hesitate. I blocked the number and deleted the thread. I rolled down the window, letting the cool night air rush in. I twisted the platinum wedding band on my finger. For years, it had felt like a shackle. I pulled it off, feeling the cool metal one last time, and flicked it out the window. It disappeared into the darkness, just a piece of debris on the side of the road. A smart woman never lets love blind her to the mathematics of life. Revenge is not about screaming or fighting. The best revenge is living a life so successful, so rich, and so free that their existence becomes nothing more than a footnote in your biography. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and give us a hype to help this story reach more people.